And I just kept telling myself, if I just put up with this long enough, 20 years from now, this will be something big. And I remember saying that to myself.
All right, so if you're a female in logistics, you're thinking about starting your own freight brokerage, or maybe you already have one, this one is for you. Kristy Knichel, kind of a badass, grew up in a very hardworking family. She wasn't afraid of hard work, and she got her first job at 16. By the way, I'm getting all of this from a lot of articles I read on her, and she also did an interview with Truck Stop. I'll put the link below. So nothing too out of the ordinary. Started work at 16. I think a lot of us do around that age, so nothing wild yet. College didn't quite captivate her, so by 19, she decided to start managing 2 pizza shops. Very hands-on there, obviously, as you would expect. She wasn't sitting behind a desk like a freight broker would just yet. And Kristy said that it was in those 2 pizza shops where she first learned to build something from nothing. And at first I was like, wait, is she talking about pizzas? But then I read a little bit more, and it sounds like it was more so taking initiative when no one else was stepping up, or learning how to manage teams or oversee deliveries and handle customer interactions. So in that sense, not the pizza making sense, all right?
I was initially working there, making the food, then I would deliver pizzas. It was really just being left on my own, and the owner really wasn't there, and having to at night close down the cash register, having to go through all the receipts and add them all up. It was all manual process. But I was just always this hard worker mentality. I would do whatever needed to be done, and I just wanted to learn.
So it sounds like the hustle was already kind of baked into her. She learned how to be efficient and independent and very sharp, on the fly. I guess you kind of have to be in many different scenarios if you're managing your own couple pizza shops at 19. So the traits she'd soon carry into a very different arena. A $100 million freight brokerage. So kind of crazy. So her dad, Bill Knichel, I have a love-hate relationship with this guy. He was in the transportation industry for some decades in the intermodal space, or the railroad space. If that's one you want to be an SF, you might know that. So when he saw Kristy's drive running pizza shops in 19, he was like, hey, you know what? You should take that strong, independent energy and apply that to the freight business. So Kristy, she quit the pizza business, and in 1997, she joined Cornerstone Logistics, which was a logistics company where her dad worked. He wasn't an owner or anything, so just an employee. So it wasn't some type of handed down family gig. I mean, obviously she had her in because he could talk her up and get her in, but sounds like she came in as a very entry level intermodal dispatcher. So the company only had 5 employees at the time. So yeah, she was there pretty much ever since the beginning, which says a lot. And she saw it all. She saw the grind, she saw the growth, she saw all the chaos. I'm sure they were all just packed in one little room. That's kind of how I'm imagining it. I'm sure she heard everything and all the craziness, which is this industry. And despite having zero freight experience, Kristy, she dove right in and she started from scratch. They didn't have that role when she first started. And so that's pretty much exactly what you'd be doing if you were to start your own freight brokerage today. So she learned how to coordinate her own shipments, and then she worked her way up by just perfecting every piece of the operation. So over the next few years, she cycled through just about every role of the company. Got dispatch, pricing, HR, billing, claims, and then she also said LTL, and then eventually a little bit of truckload. So seriously, she did it all. And that's what you have to do as your own freight brokerage owner right when you first start up. So she was learning it all from the very beginning at a very early age. So by doing every position in the company, she gained a very 360 degree view of operations and proved that she wasn't afraid to roll up her sleeve. So eventually her 2 siblings, JR and Kristy, saw what she was doing, and they wanted in on the logistics game too. So eventually the whole Knichel crew who had been working at Cornerstone, they all quit after a little while, and then they decided to do their own thing, which is kind of cool, a whole family, a little family gathering. In 2003, they then launched Knichel Logistics out of Gibsonia, Pennsylvania. They defined it as a full family-run third-party logistics company, which is awesome. And they started with intermodal freight, which makes sense. That's what her dad did for decades. So I'm hoping they didn't just take all their customers. I'm not asking any questions, all right? That's one of the hardest modes to manage. So that's pretty cool that they like got all their experience by like starting the hardest route. Regardless, clearly they had the right relationships right off the bat. Their first year, $2 million in revenue. I'd say that's pretty far from guaranteed success still with that many employees and only $2 million in revenue. Kristy had always wanted to build something of her own, she said. And then now that she like finally had that chance with their own company as like a family, even if it meant grinding through some of like the leaner years in the beginning, she thought that like this was the way, this was like how she was going to like break through and be independent. Working at a family business though, like it can be rewarding, but Kristy said like it can definitely come with its challenges, which is kind of was like, that's what I was fully expecting to hear during her interview. So her dad, Bill, sounded like he was a pretty militant leader with like very high expectations, and he didn't just go easy on her just because like she was his daughter, which I think is kind of cool. I hope he like treated her fine, but so no silver spoon there. Like it was a very trial by fire environment. And while she said it was often like very stressful because of him, it forced Kristy to develop like very thick skin and find her own voice as a leader. And I think strong, independent, not letting anyone run over you is an absolute, like you have to have that mentality or you will get run over. It's a very male dominant industry, and I think there are a lot of males who think as though they can do that to you and you just can't let them. So she even said that her dad showed her the kind of leader that like she didn't want to be. Like that's oof. So as Kristy puts it,
I think the biggest thing is treating people with respect, because I kept thinking like, why does anyone want to work for him when this is how he treats you in this environment? But outside the environment, he was a great guy.
So it was pretty clear that part of the early culture wasn't the healthiest. And Kristy, like she's saying that she wanted something very different. Like she wanted to build her own company culture around trust and respect and collaboration. A sharp contrast to her dad's like old school military style, which to be honest, like her siblings like probably didn't love it very much either. I wouldn't. And at this point, I was ready to kick him right out of the story. Okay, but hold up, plot twist. He kind of redeems himself. Being the boss's daughter in a male-dominated industry wasn't easy. In the early 2000s, there were very few women in freight, and I think even now that's still the same case. Very much so. So Kristy, around 25 years old now at this point, often found herself the only woman in the room, or even like out on the rail yard, because that's where a lot of her customers were. I'm sure she was doing a lot of like customer visits. A lot of men in the industry didn't believe that she was like actually the one in charge. I think her dad was like slowly giving her more responsibility over time, and I think it was really hard for a lot of her customers to like accept that. And some customers or carriers would even like insist on speaking with her dad instead, which I think would feel absolutely brutal. But to his credit, Bill, he stepped in. Okay, he's redeeming himself. He stepped in hard. All right, he told his business partners flat out like, she is running the business now, and if you don't like it, too bad. All right, so respect to the guy. He can stay in the story, okay? With that explicit support then from her dad, Kristy then slowly but surely like earned the respect that she deserved. But even still though, like she had to fight to be heard.
As much as I didn't want to be out there speaking publicly and putting myself out there, I knew I had to, because it was going to help me be stronger to make those decisions.
She was saying that she was very often the only female in industry meetings, which I am sure had to be very intimidating. But instead of letting that shake her, like Kristy used that experience to basically like fuel her drive. And she just refused to let bias hold her back.
I just kept telling myself, if I just put up with this long enough, 20 years from now, this will be something big.
We're fast forwarding to about a decade into the business. Things had grown, but 2013 brought Kristy one of her toughest leadership tests. The company had tried to scale very quickly by hiring an outside COO, and it sounds like it backfired pretty hardcore. Okay, they lost time and they lost money, they lost employees. And 2013 ended up being like the worst year on record for Knichel Logistics. So Kristy made the tough call. She fired the COO. Good. Get him out of here. Then in 2014, She promoted someone who'd been with the company already almost from day one, John Kristy. Honestly, not sure why like John didn't get the role the first time around. Like, dude was clearly ready, but regardless, promoting him ended up being a major turning point for them, and the company began to rebound, and momentum came back finally. Shout out to John. We like John. So then as like her dad edged towards retirement and had like slowly been giving her all responsibility, the leadership baton was fully then passed to Kristi, and she officially became COO of a multi-million-dollar freight brokerage, which is awesome. So Bill stepped away from the daily operations. We like the guy now. He's fine. And they split company ownership then amongst all of his children, giving Kristi a majority of the stake. Clearly, she proved herself. So then by 2013, with Kristi as the main owner and president of Knichel Logistics, they earned a certification as Women's Business Enterprise, which is also known as WBE, which is honestly amazing. Side note, if you're a husband and wife team, think about giving your wife 51% ownership and apply to become a WBE. A lot of large shippers have annual quotas to work with a certain number of WBE companies and minority owned and other diversity certified businesses. Just saying, do not tell anyone I told you that. So Kristi stepped into the new CEO role with a new vision. So basically, like her and John, it was their mission then at that point to diversify their services and just like invest in their future as much as they could. So Knichel was like heavily focused on intermodal, like trains and BNSF, stuff like that. But she wanted to expand first into LTL, otherwise known as less than truckload. So in 2015, Kristi partnered with Blue Grace Logistics, still around till this day. I've heard really good things actually. And that was to boost Knichel's LTL capability. So great move, by the way. If you ever want to be in the LTL kind of like arena, there are 3PLs that'll let you like just tap into their LTL relationships. I actually do that currently. It's super clutch because if you try to work with LTL carriers directly as a new broker, they'll usually shut you down because they don't have a credit rating yet. But going through a 3PL though, it lets you stay competitive without having a credit rating at all. It's kind of awesome. She also was like pushing her company to upgrade their new tech stack, like TMS, better data, smarter decisions. And coming from Amazon corporate, I'll tell you straight up, data is king, man. So if you ever get a hold of that, if you ever like partner with some kind of 3PL and they can give you data, look at it, Hawkeye it, send it to your customers if it's a customer facing type thing. Over the next several years, Knichel Logistics then went from single digit millions into the tens of millions, pretty much because of Kristi, okay? Like a very strong, focused female leader who didn't let a male-dominated industry slow her growth. Like, dude, I love her, man. She is very inspiring for me. Long story short, they went from $2 million to nearly $100 million in annual revenue, okay? So for context, in 2020, they hit $83.5 million in sales, and we're still climbing. And their staff grew from that original 10 to 55 full-time employees. And as of 2023, they've passed 65 employees. I wouldn't consider like having a ton of employees a direct correlation to your success, but still badass that she was expanding. So like very clearly there was no luck involved. Like Kristi laser focused on reducing reliance on that one niche, which was intermodal, probably tied to like a few big customers that like her and her dad had like worked on over the years. From what Kristi was saying, she very much crafted her own leadership style around like respect and empowerment and purpose.
And teaching them. And I think the biggest thing is treating people with respect, because I kept thinking, like, why does anyone want to work for him when this is how he treats you in this environment? But outside the environment, he was a great guy.
And honestly, I fully agree. Like that's pretty much one of the reasons why I left the 9-to-5. You can't control a culture as much as an employee, but you can as a freight broker or a president of a freight brokerage, and you have a lot more control over it and who you hire. And that's a huge edge. Kristi was saying that a happy and motivated team is absolutely key to long-term success. And I don't blame her. Like Knichel Logistics was even named one of Pittsburgh's best places to work, which is awesome. It sounds like as of today, 70% of her employees are women, which is badass. And she built an environment where women can build real careers in logistics, like intentionally and powerfully and like unapologetically. And the fact that like Kristi had literally been in every single role before she got to where she was is basically a way that her team is so like accepting of a lot of the feedback that they receive from her. So if you own your own freight brokerage right now, like you might know that feeling too, like doing everything yourself until you can start hiring and delegating. It's part of the process. And she said that her main principle is listen to the customer. And I wholeheartedly agree. That's coming from someone who worked at corporate Amazon. That was like their number one principle too. Remember a few videos ago when we talked about like the whole 2 years, 1 mouth thing? Maybe Crystal saw that video and took some notes. I'm just saying. She says that understanding and adapting to your customers' needs is the number one way to grow. I 100% agree. And she said this is number one beyond any fancy strategies or expensive tools. So yes, you as a freight broker startup owner can very much follow that as well. And it's free. She's also very clearly passionate about lifting up other women in freight and logistics. And then in 2015, she became the inaugural winner of the Distinguished Women in Logistics Award, which is awesome. And that was presented by the Women in Trucking Association. And she even had to overcome a fear of public speaking to accept that award on stage at a major industry event. I definitely struggle with the same thing. Maybe some of you do too. She's very much a normal person, just like you and I, clearly. And she knew how important it was to like show up and like represent women in leadership. And I think she now even leads some like really big meetings and stuff. So she's clearly gotten over that fear. So if you're a female looking to start your own freight brokerage and you want support from other women chasing this same dream, we've got an exclusive Discord community just for you guys. So it's a space to connect and to learn and to grow. And in this very much male-dominated industry. And now, if you're ready to get moving, here are 6 steps to become a freight broker and start building your own $100 million story. All right, let's go. Let's do it.